Kia ora. Welcome. Koreli Tupuingoa. This is the first time that we've run the Wine, Cheese and Wāhine initiatives out in Lower Hutt, in Te Khajehzadeh, which is awesome. So it's cool to be able to try something new and come out these ways and connect with a community that we do a lot of work in. So cool to see some people from around here. And normally, so if you're wondering who Madison are and why we're connected with them, they have been sponsoring these events since the start of last year, and they host the events normally at their whare in Custom House Quay, on the corner of Custom House Quay in town. They've got a beautiful venue with harbour, so which is pretty nice, but this is also very beautiful looking out at the moment, and some people playing sport, which is fitting, although they are male. But we try. We should have told stock out to bring some Wāhine players out for our event. But yeah, kia ora. I'm really excited to talk to these awesome Wāhine today. And so I'll just hand over to them to introduce themselves.
Hey everyone, my name's Avin. I'm a young person from Wellington, but originally I migrated here from Iran. So my family and I came here when I was 6. And I've been living in Wellington since then. I've kind of been moving around. We started in Newtown with a big migrant community, and I grew up quite with a group of diverse people around me, and then I kind of migrated around Wellington and now based in Church Park. I recently just finished high school and I'm moving up to Auckland on Saturday to start university and start my Bachelor of Health Science to go into medicine. Over the past few years I've been involved quite strongly in the refugee advocacy space, and I've been working with change makers and starting some initiatives here and there, and I did some work with the Ministry of Health to redesign their cultural competency courses for healthcare workers working with refugees. So that's kind of the spaces that I work in. I'm really excited to talk to you all today.
Wow. Beautiful. Talofa everyone, or Lo'olingoa, or Shannon Doreen King. Luckily for me, I get to be named after my Nana Doreen, who is probably the person who has been most formative in my life. One of those really staunch advocates that you really just don't want to mess around with. But affectionately known amongst some of our Pacific community as Alofa. My background is I'm a youth worker. I started youth working, travelling with young people at about 17, 18. As a high school dropout, I ended up in church, connected into youth work through that avenue, and found that there was a lot more to youth development than the walls of the church, and so began exploring what supporting young people outside of a faith journey looked like. And sort of 10, 15 years later, here I am. I have been a youth worker in high schools. I've been a youth worker in a family violence prevention agency and a one-stop shop. And so I have dabbled in lots of different spaces and places along the way. But currently I work for the local council here in Te Khajehzadeh as what we call a neighbourhood facilitator. Essentially, I get to try and weave people together, whether it's within community, but predominantly it's about connecting council and community together in ways that council or community might not have been able to do before. Summary, long story short, anyways.
And I should also mention we're going to have 3 panellists today. So AJ, Andrea Jackson, who is one of our Makora colleagues, was going to be on this panel as well. And she is an awesome Wāhine who we're really lucky to have. Wairarapa born and bred, hearty, Masterton, has spent time working in council, but also was the first female CEO of a provincial rugby union. She was the CEO at Manawatu Rugby, and so has lots of amazing learnings to share from that. So we're sad that she couldn't be here today, but she's looking after a family member. So family comes first. But yeah, just a mickey out to her. Just imagine that she's sitting here soaking up the vibes, which she would be, and she's there. Yeah, and she would be like just passing it Jaraka onto YouTube to talk probably anyway. But yeah, killed it. So really excited to have you guys here. And so the theme of today's kōrero, just kind of based off chats that I've had with both Avin and Sionainn, is around how do we empower young women to step into themselves through leadership opportunities, and that can come in many shapes or forms, because being a participant in sport or recreation is a form of leadership in itself, in a team or leading self, but also within the sector there are opportunities to lead an organisation or be on a board, coach. There's so many different forms of leadership, and so a really fitting theme to explore, like a big topic to explore. It's pretty broad. We haven't really made it easy for ourselves today, but so I really want to know your perspectives on how do we empower young women through opportunity. What does that look like? What are the enablers, the barriers? Any key examples? If I really want to start on that one.
They're so broad.
or what in your mahi that you've seen?
Yeah.
How does empowering young women work? How have you seen it in action?
I've seen it in action in lots of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a dreamy world, what it looks like is where everyone can work in a collaborative manner, where we all know who's the expert in what. And so for me, I'm not in youth development explicitly anymore, but what I have done in the last couple of years since being at council is I've learned what good engagement does and doesn't do, and I know that I can engage young people well. You put me in front of a group of young people and you'll get a very different version of the shadow that you get right here today. I know that I can draw out of young people what is required for the space that matters, but I know that I don't know what the heck to do with it then. I know that I'm not the expert in where to take that knowledge next, but since being here at council, I'm leaning into my colleagues who do engagement stuff and methodologies and those sorts of things and pulling data together. They're the experts in that. And so for me, is what I've learned is that I've done really great youth engagement over my career to this point, but what have I done with that engagement has been the tricky part for me to, I guess, reconcile now. It doesn't really answer your question, but probably opens up more questions.
Yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing is that I was actually in one of your engagement sessions. I can't remember what it was, but I think it was one of the Hutt City Council youth kind of groups that came together to look at new initiatives. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And we looked at new initiatives and what we thought about it, and you led that group, which was really cool. So I was kind of I can approach this from like a youth perspective, and I think it was really interesting. I think what worked really well as a young person in that kind of environment was having someone that felt like they were on our team and they were approaching the problem more with us rather than as it. So I feel like a lot of the time people will come with you and they're like, hey, so we've seen this problem, now you guys tell us what you think the problem is and what you think the solution is, and then we'll consider fixing it and 9 times out of 10 they're not going to do that, right? Whereas I think the way that you guys approached it was like, them who don't know who this is, they've identified this problem. Now we can come approach this together. And I have some insight from my career, and I have some insight coming from the council, and then you guys, other youth, you guys have been in this environment, you have experienced all of this, what do you think about this? And I think it was that kind of collaborative nature of approaching a problem and approaching it from one team rather than multiple teams, and kind of recognizing that all these young people come from completely different backgrounds. We had people from public schools, private schools, schools that weren't even in the heart, and approaching the same problem. And it was really cool recognizing all those differences, but then all those similarities, and that we're all recognizing this as an issue, and this is an issue that needs to be fixed.
Can I give some context to that piece of work there that might be helpful for people? Is at council is looking at how do we engage with young people? Exactly this kōrero here today. And my colleague that looks after that team actually was like, oh, we have a great team, but actually our team doesn't work with young people. So who else can we lean into that has worked with young people? And apparently my name came up along the way, that Sionainn's been a youth worker in her time, so let's lean into that. And what that piece of work was, our draft action plan. So we'd already heard a bunch of stuff from young people. We'd already put together an action plan, but this was us going back to our youth community to say, this is what we heard, are we on the right track? And then the result of that, can I just say, is our friend Nat here. So what then happened was, I did that engagement. I went in and talked to the young people and pulled together all of the information, rolled up the nice bits of paper, and I gave it back to my colleagues. They went and they did all I believe, the actual hard work in pulling that information together to be able to go back to our elected members, and the result of that was a full-time person that's now dedicated to young people, both connecting the sector together, but predominantly in looking at how does council engage well with young people. And so there's the result of our Wāhine of that day.
I think one of those cool things is that the whole idea of getting feedback and getting those conversations on paper, and then actually going back to that same community and being, is this what you actually said? Because a lot of the times the way people interpret things, and especially if they're not part of that group, and if they're not kind of a part of that community, they can interpret it in the way they want to. And that's kind of the whole idea of the confirmation bias. You're going, you're like, okay, this is the problem that I think it is. I'm going to ask them if that's true, and then whatever answer they say, I'm going to shape it into my idea of it that already exists in your brain. And so a lot of the times when the way you interpret the feedback you're getting from the community is not exactly the same as what they're telling you. And I think that's where it's so important to actually go back to them with exactly what you've got in a fully written report, and be like, step by step, this is what we got under each topic. Do you guys agree with this? If not, how do you think we can change it to be more aligned with what you think?
Yeah, and it's relational too, right? Like I think in stakeholder management and kind of adult world relationship building, we know that you don't just go and ask someone for something and then bugger off and never talk to them again. But it is much more common with young people. That you just do the engagement and then you go, cool, look, we put in this fun slide in a fun colour.
I think what's interesting about that is I see in comment sections we had made a post about that piece of work where we were talking about some prizes that young people were able to get if they participated in a survey, that sort of thing. And what was really interesting is a lot of the comments talked about, oh, these young people don't pay rates. And it's like, oh, actually, a whole lot of these young people are actually like the taxpayers. These young people that are like working early to be able to provide for their whānau. What also is, I just wish that I could help people understand that, not right now. Like, they might not pay rates right now, but they're probably contributing to your rates. And so how do we help debunk these ideas that, it's not for the right now, it's actually for our long-term, the long-term health, holistic health of our communities. Yeah. Because I think that if we can get young people active in sharing their voice now, like active citizenship to me is really just belonging. Yeah.
That's cool. I would love to dig into an awesome kaupapa that Avin has run in terms of developing some yoga classes for Wāhine and Wāhine in the former refugee community. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was through Changemakers, and we have Lucia here today, and she supported me a lot through that project. So it actually started at a football tournament that you guys ran. Changemakers ran this football tournament, and it was for the community. It was for little kids all the way to adults, and it was a free event. They came, it was all day, and they had people from health providers come, so they had Be Healthy there and GPs there, just to come and connect with the community and get enrollments going in kind of their own space rather than making it inaccessible. So at that event I was talking to some of the mothers of the young kids that were there, and I was talking to them about like their kids' sports, and I was asking kind of how they stayed active. And it was really interesting because coming from a migrant background, sports and fitness was never really a top priority in the women in my family, and we never saw it as something that had to be done. It was kind of like a luxury of like when you've reached a point in your life where you had a stable home, work, family, then you could actually consider looking after your well-being and taking up a sport. And a lot of the times, at best, that would just be going for nightly walks. And when I was talking to these women, that was the exact same kind of message that I was getting, and it was similar to all the stuff that I had heard from my parents and my parents' friends growing up. So that's kind of when I started thinking, why don't we have a similar initiative for women, and why is it just kind of a boys' event that we have, that they get to come and play football? We have nothing similar for women, and it's not just because we're like, oh, actually only men are allowed to play this football tournament, but it's actually that it's just not something that they're interested in. And I started working with the team at Changemakers, who works really closely with that community, and speaking to more members of the community about what kind of activity would you guys be interested in. And that's kind of where the idea of yoga came from. It was kind of something that I was interested in, something that I had partaken in a lot over the past year, and it was something that to me seemed more accessible than having to go every single day, or it didn't seem extraneous or super demanding of your body and health. It was actually both mental and physical well-being that you felt like you were taking care of. So we reached out to the community and different yoga studios and see who wanted to actually help us support this. So many people were keen, and we kind of talked to them about times and days until we decided something that worked. And I think the biggest part was actually talking to the community and seeing what worked for them when it came to this. And it's an ongoing process as well, because we had set dates and we had people that wouldn't come. And a lot of the times it wasn't actually because the initiative was bad, it was just because we didn't have those conversations about when would this be good for you? Where would this be good for you? And I think it's really important to recognize that a lot of these things are still a work in progress, and like even with this project, we still haven't reached a place where I'm like, this is the best thing ever that we've created, the community's super happy about this, we're super happy about this, but it's something that has been working really well. And we had all these women come through, and a lot of them wouldn't come every week because that's just like not an expectation that we can set, but we had people that would come one week and then not the next and then come back. But the community feedback that we got was amazing about it, and it was something that they actually wanted to partake in, and something that they had asked for and they had received, which was kind of something that we had really been hoping for the event.
That's such a common theme, I think, in particularly I think in the sport and recreation space, where we kind of expect young women to fit into the way that we've been running things, which is a very male-dominated traditional way of doing things. And things are changing for sure, but there is definitely kind of structures and the competitiveness and some of the demands that a lot of young women just don't want. no matter how much you try and make it an inclusive space.
Well, exactly, and it's like for us, a lot of the problems that we face with that, we have mothers who couldn't just leave their kids alone at home and come to a yoga class. Whereas when it came to our football tournament, we had all these dads who came for the whole day and they were completely fine. And it was about the accessibility of making something. If you're making an event and you're like, oh, this is a tournament of whatever sport, and it's open to everyone who wants to come, all genders, everyone can come. But with the location and the time, you're actually limiting who can actually come. So while you're advertising it as something that's super accessible, it's actually genuinely not. And sometimes those are intentional limitations to who can come. But it's really important to actually sit down and recognize that there are those limitations. Like for mothers or who are single mothers, or even those who have partners to depend on, what are they going to do with their kids during those hours? What are they going to be eating and drinking during that time? How are they going to get there? How are they going to get home? And all those kind of things.
Sionainn, I know you worked a little bit with Avin. I'm sorry, total brain fart. What's the name of it? Ignite. Similar word. Ignite Sport out here in the hut, and they have a bit of a program that supports young women's leadership. Have you seen any of the kind of learnings from that space?
Yeah, I think what's really cool for me personally is that there's the first Wāhine program was actually ended up being run by somebody who used to be part of a youth group that I used to help out with. And so now she's currently on maternity leave, and I've just found out a week or so ago that one of our mutual young people is now looking after that program.
Amazing.
And I think that it's, how do you read that? I think what's fun is to watch, here in the hut in particular, is there's a generational model of youth work, I guess, that happens here, where I don't know why these young people decide that they want to get into youth work after meeting some like real out the gate youth workers. But I think that they are wanting to share the same experiences with other young people as what they got to experience with us. And I should also say that there's a fourth generation that's starting, and so I feel like this like great grandma of like but there's this young person that's now in her second year studying youth work, but she's been mentored by like kind of 3 generations of us, or just these extra aunties that come along with other youth workers. I think that that's the thing for me, is making sure that like who's in your community of practice, who are you leaning into, who as a practitioner is who's supporting you to travel these spaces, because I know that actually by myself I'm a really like state youth worker, but actually when I get to be in relationship and in good wānanga and community with other youth workers, it always draws out the best of me, but it's because we fill the gaps for each other. And so and I think that it's not just about like who's like within your own organisations either, is who we're partnering with. And so the only reason that I actually got to be part of Wāhine is because the program was being run at Nānai College, where when I was working at Vibe Youth House Service, I was based at Nānai College, and actually some of these young people that had been identified as part of the Wāhine program, I'm like, oh, actually we can see that some of these patterns for these young people, they'll probably end up in my caseload in a couple of years. And so why would I not start building relationship now, so then we can get into the real big work once they sort of hit that age bracket. And so that was kind of what that collaborative moment looked like. And it was literally just a day or two a term, really, and dropping by their weekly sessions. just swinging by. I think, yeah, that's the collaborative work, but actually sometimes the collaborative work involves just picking up a tea towel and just serving alongside of each other. What does it look like just to share the load? Yeah, in a collaborative way.
Yeah, and that's awesome, because I think that's also what we're trying to create with this space, is a space where people can connect and share what works in terms of supporting young women and what doesn't work, and rather than reinventing the wheel all the time, actually just going, oh, cricket's doing this, or there's some cool youth group doing this thing, how can I adapt this to fit my offering?
Yeah.
Or how can I partner and do some kind of combined thing? So yeah.
I think that we've just been in, and I don't think it's getting any easier, is like the funding realm is so competitive, and everyone is competing for the same pieces of funding, and probably for the same programs or the same type of programs. So actually, like, would we not want to like almost halve our like own investment into that and be partnering better with each other? But I think that I don't know what the answer is to that. I think that it's going to be like a forever question, and we won't know that it's the right thing until we're like 10 years on the track. We're like, oh wow, yeah, that's right, that was really good. But I think that, yeah, the partnership stuff and being able to collaborate together is the solution, but how we get to really do that solution well, I don't know. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's not really. I think a lot of the time people will talk about there's a shortage of resources out there, and I think while in some cases that's true, I think there's also a lot. It's just that people have no idea that they exist, because people think, oh yeah, this doesn't exist, let me just create a new program, and they add on top of that, and so they create a whole bunch of these programs, and it's like probably like 8 different ones. And it's catering towards the same group of people, it's the exact same thing, and they're competing for the same funding for it. And a lot of them will lose out, whereas I think what Lily was saying is that actually finding all these things and saying, okay, this person, I've got this idea, and this person's got something either similar or the exact same. What about, instead of competing with them and trying to make ours a little bit better and a little bit more edgy, what if we just work together and create something super awesome? And that way we can reach even more people together. I think that's the best way to do it, because otherwise, even as young people, then we're confused about which is the best place to go to for help and support. Because this person's offering me this, and this person's offering me that, and it's kind of the same, kind of not. I don't know, I'll just leave that on the side later. And then neither of the resources are ever used.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and again, like, it comes back to what is your end goal? What is your end purpose? Which I think for all of us, it's improving well-being, and people just enjoying whatever they're doing and getting active in whatever way is best for them. And so it shouldn't be about getting more people into your thing, but getting more people into anything and everything. Ultimately, so that partnership approach.
Yeah, when you're trying to come up with, I think one of my friends introduced me to design principles a while ago when I was trying to come up with the yoga idea. And one of the really important key things that stuck with me in those was that when you're trying to create something new, look at what's already existing and what about it is working and what about it is not working. And those conversations come from the community. It's not you looking at it from an outside perspective as a designer and be like, oh, this seems like this is great, and this differs from my idea, so that's not great. But actually talking to the community and the designers of that, and be like, what about this is working for you, and what about it is not, and how can we improve it in the future for you? Because all this stuff, a version of it has existed in the past, and it's actually going back on the stuff that came before us and the people that came before us to use the resources that are available to us and make them better. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be new and innovative and create something new all the time. It's actually using pre-existing resources and just making them better and adapting them to the new generations of people that are coming.
Totally. I'm mindful of time. I have one more like quick fire answer in like a word or a sentence kind of a question before other people can answer Q&A. What would be your call to action to this group in terms of how what they can implement to better support and serve young women? So that could be, I mean, we've got system leaders, we've got managers, we've got people from community organisations, providers. Any words of wisdom in like a sentence or less, Shane? Don't go too far.
Where are your intentional relationships? Not just those relationships that you're like, oh, I have this thing that I need to tick a box with, but actually those spaces that you turn up to regardless of if you need something. Where are those? Because like we're talking a lot about like going to community, but actually don't go to community unless you have a good quality relationship. Because otherwise it's just you coming or we coming and like leeching information. Don't do that. Like, yes, I think what it really comes to is like relationships have to be of like mutual benefit, and it's like cool, we can go out and get from community, but actually what a community receiving back from us.
Mine would be, I think, to reflect. Try and identify something new that you've created in the past year, in the past month, and reflect on, was there something before that similar that's existed, and how does mine differ, and how is the existence of mine at the same time affecting them, and can we work together to combine something even better together rather than just simultaneously existing with little purpose.
Cool, mic drop. Questions? Crickets.
I'm just consciousness about women and girls, when we were talking youth building across the genders. What's the difference between, for example, if we're just looking at male versus female, for instance, is there a different approach for young women?
Personally, I try not to have a different approach. I know that some people would adapt their approach depending on gender or who's partaking in the group, but I try not to have a different approach purely from the sense of like, actually then everyone can have the same experience. But it also means that it makes it so much easier in a group setting when you do have like multiple genders in the same space. And then even then, if I'm going to tailor anything, is I tailor it to kind of where I'm interacting with an individual. Definitely, I don't know if that will answer your pathway, but
I'm just thinking sometimes the response is not as good.
yeah. I think maybe I do change it. Like maybe I do, and it's just become like a little bit normal in my practice. But I do know that when it comes to like moving in the space, is I'll change and adapt depending on, probably more code switch depending on the young person that I'm interacting with. That's probably a better way to go about it actually. Yeah, but I think that's also again like that thing around like where's our expertise, and like actually like I know that I'm not the best person to like actually host a like space with like young women. Like I can do it, but actually am I the right person to like draw all the goodness out? Nah. Like my friend Ali, like that's her jam. But I'll be in the back being like pottering around the space and like those individual sorts of things. And so it's about knowing where our expertise is and who else can carry that.
Any thoughts, Avin?
think that a lot of damage can happen when it's approached differently, and I see it a lot in my younger brother, because a lot of the time women are approached because they're like, oh, like we need more women in this space. And I think while that's true, a lot of those shy younger guys, I feel like, oh, well, yeah, they need the women, they're more powerful, they're more confident, they can speak better, so let's just have them. And I think when you approach young women saying, oh, like, I know that you have a voice, I know you have power, and while in the same space with the young guys, I think that can be really damaging, because that sets a big difference in that we just want your voice, because we've heard from you from generations before you. So I guess in a way, they're slowly being punished for the generations before them and them speaking too much, so then they're allowed less of a voice. And I think it's really important in those spaces to not punish anyone for the people that came before them, and that just let everyone have the exact same amount of space and voice and opportunity. Yeah.
I thought point to partnership and relationships and the collaboration, and saying that you didn't know the answers to what that looks like for young women, youth. But I think that's the point, is that the young woman or the voice of Wāhine, say for example, is that they know the solution, so they're the ones that are going to be the conduit, or the people that are going to tell you what is that collaboration, partnership, relationship. So even though you nailed it in terms of what does that look like when you're in it, and not knowing the answers, I feel like actually if you've got the right voices around the table, there's a solution already right at the beginning and the offset.
Yeah. I think it's really important to recognise as well, because those people have actually already been working for solutions at the grassroots. They've been working for ways to solve the problem that they've been identifying within their own community, right at that community level. And now they're being approached by these people like, oh, what's your solution? What do you want to do? Trying to get information out of them. But they've already been working on solutions themselves. So it's about seeing what they're actually doing, because they know what's up.
And the same again with the expertise, it's like, you know, you function off a strengths-based approach. You might not have the expertise, which is totally okay as well, but you know, what is the voice telling you around their expert and the expert direction and approach?
Yeah. I think you said something really interesting around, like they know the answer. Something that I've been wrestling with lately, and this is probably just putting like a little like spoon in the pot to stir the fuss tonight, is around the idea of like, oh, like do they actually know? Like when I think about like my own self as sort of maybe like a 15, 16-year-old young person, is I actually had no idea what I wanted or needed. But what was really helpful for me was nobody else setting any expectations on that. And my the youth workers in my world at that time, like bless them, the most patient humans I've ever known in my life. But they were okay with the fact that I didn't know either. And they were just thoughtful and creative around how they would prompt me to land into my own space. But I think that's where like we have to be equipping ourselves with these like really gold like prompts and questions, and like I worked at Tony Fair on the weekend, and I had all these follow-up questions for people that came to our council stall, and I don't think that they were quite expectant of these follow-up partai that would try and like flesh out what the actual issue was, or what the actual thing was. And so I think that tuck in our pockets like some good like little AI prompts to really draw the deeper goodness out, things that aren't a yes, no, you know, there's open questions. But it's hard sometimes.
Yeah, I think as leaders, when you recognise your limitations and your expertise, it normalises that for the young people as well. So when you recognise that you might not know the answer to a problem, or you don't even know, you can't even recognise what the problem is, it normalises that for them as well, and they don't feel the pressure to know what the problem or solution is.
Yeah, and I think that, acknowledging it is probably the big thing. And I think that I did that in our workshop together a few times, is I was like, I don't have the answer, but let's explore it together. And I think the key thing is like, let's explore together. together, exploring, finding our way. Yeah. Any other questions? No. Okay. Summer's thinking real hard for a question.
I'm just going to pop up and say that I've done the MOH
Oh yeah.
change of the cultural competencies, and they have changed.
Yeah.
So if it was you, Laura.
Yeah, so we're actually taking those courses now back to the community. So I think they're in the trial phase of like doing the new ones to people and then going back to with your feedback, and then also going back with the courses to the community to see, is this what you wanted, and is this how you would want it run? Which I think is really important in system change, is when you make the change, actually go back and say, is this exactly how you envisioned it? Is this exactly how you would ask us to do it?
Cool. If there's no other questions, we might close there. Thank you so much to both of you. This has been an awesome chat. And we do have a little, this side, we do have a little koha just on behalf of Gora and Medicine. One's a little.
Oh, thank you.